not in jail for this? How is this not pure crime? If it's not treason, it's treason adjacent. That's for sure. Hey there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I thought I'd take this Friday to talk about the implications of the recent letter that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta sent to the U.S. Congress with regard to the way the government, and specifically the FBI, pressured Facebook to censor information and what that means for our democracy, and talk about these platforms and the role they play in our society. Let's actually start off by just reading a little bit from the letter that's pertinent to, I think, all of us and to the election of 2020. Zuckerberg writes that in 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take down content, and we own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. One of the things about the government pressure here is that we have a lot of agencies in our federal government doing a lot of things, often in isolation, often coordinated. And one of the things that needs to be always kept in mind is that while the defenders of government action in this case have claimed that this was just requests, they were voluntary, it was just suggestions, on behalf of the public good. In the other hand was the Federal Trade Commission actively threatening to break up Facebook, to file suit against Facebook. That is what's going on when we talk about government pressure. It is the gun. And I know that's like feels like a libertarian talking point, like, oh, what are taxes? Well, they'll throw you in jail if you don't pay them. That is true. It is coercion. And in this case, though, it is very, very specifically coercion. Coercion to violate the First Amendment of the United States. Every single federal employee, and especially our elected officials, as part of their job, take an oath. And that oath is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, the law of this land. And the First Amendment, the first and most important protection in our law, is the protection against censorship and restrictions of freedom of speech and expression. It is illegal for our federal government to do anything that restricts our ability to assemble, to complain about and to our government, to exercise our religious liberty, such as, go to church when there's a flu about us, and to exercise our freedom of speech and expression, as well as the freedom of the press. Now, you could argue whether or not Facebook and platforms like it constitute the press, but you would certainly say that they could, and we, the people, certainly have the right to have free expression without any constraints or abridging thereof. What the Biden administration was doing here was illegal, was an affront to our basic constitutional rights. It goes deeper than that, and Zuck actually talks about it in the next paragraph, where he says, in a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. That fall, we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. We sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it while waiting for a reply. It's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation, and in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. We've changed our policies and processes to make sure this doesn't happen again. It can't be overstated how big and influential Facebook as a platform is. In fact, as of the fourth quarter of 2023, which is the most recent data I have from Statista, there are over 3 billion with a B active monthly users on Facebook. 3 billion with a B. That is 3 times the population of planet Earth in the 1800s. So that just gives you a sense of the magnitude of influence that these requests were having. Everyone's on Facebook. Now, mostly boomers are paying attention to Facebook, but I digress. This was a major intervention into the 2020 election. It's been talked about ad nauseum, but I think this revelation here, not just of the request, but also of the particular details, the fact that it was actually specifically referencing Burisma and the manifestly corrupt and should be deeply worrisome relationships that the Biden family had with Ukraine and Ukraine's state-adjacent oil company, that would have been pertinent for the voters to fully understand. And it was suppressed. Now, I want to recount some of the steps along the way to where we are today, because Zuck has alluded to this in the past and was actually brought before Congress not soon after that New York Post article was published. So going back in time to 2020, the New York Post actually published that article, I believe, on October 14th. And on October 28th, Zuck is pulled before Congress to talk about what Facebook is doing in the face of the oddity of the moment and all of the claims about foreign intervention and Russian disinformation and yada, yada, yada.
How do we balance free expression and safety? How do we define what is dangerous? Who should decide? I don't believe that private companies should be making so many decisions about these issues by themselves.
So those are really important questions to ask. How do we understand? How do we know what's safe or not, whatever that's supposed to mean? What does safe even mean when it comes to speech and information exactly? And who should decide? Who? On the basis of what?
The reality is that people have very different ideas and views about where the lines should be. Democrats often say that we don't remove enough content, and Republicans often say we remove too much.
This is really weird. I know it's obvious at this point. The Democratic Party has become the party of censorship, and there are sort of philosophical roots behind the reason why the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has become anti-free speech. They go back to the radicals of the 1960s like Herbert Marcuse, and this notion that there's a kind of superstructure of fascism awaiting and we can't tolerate anything that's fascism adjacent, which is defined as anything not communism, basically. And so we have to protect ourselves from fascism, and that means we have to become fascists. That's happening on the left. And if you consider yourself a liberal, it should send chills down your spine, because it is the death of liberalism on the left. And Zuck is saying it here, and we know it's true. And it is a fact. Democrats and the Democratic Party as a whole, not the people, but the party and its apparatchiks, want more censorship. They want our information to be constrained to just the things they want us to hear about, not what we want to go out and search for, including mis and dis and malinformation, which is, of course, my favorite. Malinformation is true information that's harmful. Yeah, kind of like the Hunter Biden laptop, actually. Why is this important? Why should we be outraged that criminal acts have taken place in the name of, frankly, we're still not sure what? Because it was clear that the attempts to censor the Hunter Biden laptop came from the FBI, who knew the laptop was real. So what's going on there exactly? It wasn't misinformation. So this was a blatant attempt by federal agencies, and specifically law enforcement, the guys with the guns, literally, to manipulate our election at the most crucial time. There is no answer there that's any good. But if you want to see how bad it can get in the West, never mind all the communist hellholes that have imprisoned people for saying whatever the rulers don't like, you have to look no further than across the pond to our former rulers, the United Kingdom, to see how off the rails this is already going in the West, in the land of the Magna Carta, the United Kingdom. real quick, for a little bit of context, this is a Met police chief talking about what's going on in terms of civil unrest and people taking to the streets about immigration and economic policy and all kinds of things. And he's really upset that people are actually speaking out on social media platforms in ways that he doesn't like or considers hateful.
Being a keyboard warrior does not make you safe from the law. You can be guilty of offences of incitement, of stirring up racial hatred. There are numerous terrorist offences regarding the sort of publishing of material. All of those offences are in play if people are provoking hatred and violence on the streets, and we'll come after those individuals just as we will physically confront on the streets the thugs and the yobs who are causing the problems for communities.
So this is actually happening in the UK. People are being arrested for their Facebook posts. And because they're being arrested for so-called misinformation. And who has decided it's misinformation? Well, the people with guns.
Arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network. Do you understand that?
So I'm actually being arrested?
You're going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
Take you up to the police station.
Right.
You, okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, it's a Facebook crime, is it? I'm going to be arrested for posting on Facebook.
Made some comments that are offensive, obscene, and people have made a complaint about that, and it's
and can you tell me what this comment was?
That's not fake. That happened. That's happening a lot. And I don't even know how the people of England can sit there and call themselves civilized. This is barbarism. This is basically Soviet-style behavior. And it is the result of so-called hate speech laws. Now, hate is never well defined. It's like sort of like pornography. I know it when I see it. But for the purposes of those in power, hate is whatever they need it to be to arrest people and ultimately just silence everyone with fear, right? That's really what all of this is about. It's not about arresting everyone that says naughty things on the internet. It's about making an example of certain people, especially the powerless, so that everyone else shuts the hell up. That's what these actions are about. It's about control of the public. We need to be vigilant and on guard for this kind of tyranny with every bone in our body. And here's why I say that. This censoriousness taking place, and it is not just on the left. There is right-wing cancel culture too. This is an assault on every right we have. So if you want to be civic-minded and understand the way our system works and the way freedom in this country works, when we say we live in a free country, first and foremost, that's about the ability to speak, including to make mistakes and say harmful, even hateful things. But not everyone agrees. In fact, our current vice presidential nominee on the Democratic ticket doesn't agree either. He wants us to be more like Britain.
Years ago, it was the little things, telling people to vote the day after the election. And, we kind of brushed them off. Now we know it's intimidation at the ballot box. Mm-hmm. It's undermining the idea that mail-in ballots aren't legal. I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy. Tell the truth where the voting places are, who can vote, who's able to be there. And watching some states continue to weaken the protections around the ballot, I think, is what inspiring us to lean into this. Again, all we're asking is to make it as easy and simple as possible to exercise their right to vote.
So you see, that's all wrapped up, really caring about exercising the right to vote and really not wanting you to be able to vote on the basis of anything real. That's what's going on. We want to make it a glide path to pull the lever on the basis of nonsense, on the basis of incomplete information that we have actively kept you from getting access to. We have decided what you will get to know about. And in the case of Governor Walz and Kamala Harris, the answer for what information you're going to have if you go to their website as of this recording is nothing, because we are now after the Democratic National Convention. And they have still not published any public policies on their website. So there's a lot of talk about voting. There's not a lot of talk about information. In fact, we seem to be dealing with a world in which the people who claim to care the most about democracy want to keep us the most in the dark that they possibly can. Now, back in 2022, Mark Zuckerberg did an interview with Joe Rogan in which he actually admitted to some of what was going on. It actually points to something that I think many people don't fully understand. And it's subtle, but it's really important to know when we talk about what is happening here.
There was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York
we
Post.
had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter.
And the different path here is Twitter just took everything down.
Basically, the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that.
There's about to be the dump of a thing that we've actually had in our possession before and that we know for a fact is real, and we're lying to you. That's what was actually said. If they were being honest, to say that's what they would have said.
Our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have...
And just as a reminder, Twitter actually suspended the New York Post's account. They actually stopped a major newspaper, one of the oldest newspapers in the country, love it or hate it, from being able to post on the platform in the face of publishing a real and very important story about deep corruption involving the potential future president's family. Like, how is everybody not in jail for this? How is this not pure crime? How is everyone not at the FBI that was involved and every government agent that participated in this, including the 50-plus intelligence agents who came out saying this has all the hallmarks of Russian propaganda? How are they not all in jail? If it's not treason, it's treason adjacent, that's for sure. It's certainly a violation of your oath of office, and it's fraud because it's knowing deceit.
We also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less.
I want to go over what this ranking and distribution means. I actually want to use a couple of our videos and give you a little window into the back end of Dad Saves America on YouTube as an example of what Mark is talking about when he says sort of manipulating the ranking system. Here's our last Friday video talking about price controls and zombie economics. So far that's had about 33,000 views. How did those views happen? That thumbnail is put in your feed. That, when you see it, when it comes across your screen, that is an impression. And so, if you think about this, and I'm a big YouTube guy myself, I love it. It's the #1 app I go to. I open it up, and there's not that. This is the big iPhone. This is the 15 Pro Max. There's not that much real estate, right? 2 icons, 2. There's billions of videos on YouTube. There's millions posted every day. But when I open it, I see 2 icons in any given time on a giant phone. 4 if it's shorts. I just was generating impressions as I scroll through my feed. Impressions. Why did I see the particular icons, the particular thumbnails in my feed? Who picked which ones? It's not a human. The answer is some mechanism has to decide how to make use of my scarce time and scarce screen real estate on my iPhone. And so the ranking algorithm is born. And every platform now makes use of something just like this. That impression is is YouTube deciding to show you the thumbnail. That's how you're here. You're here most likely because this thumbnail appeared in your screen, in your feed, and you clicked on it. When you clicked on it, that was a click. And so that's called the click-through rate. And so what happens in YouTube parlance is videos that have high levels of engagement, thumbnails that generate click-throughs and have a high click-through rate get shown to more people. So this thumbnail was shown to 423,000 people, and about 5% clicked on it and watched it, and that gives rise to about 30,000 views. That is what's going on. An important way to think about that is that we didn't spend money to do that, to get this in front of you. Do we have a right to this, to impressions on YouTube? YouTube is free. It's free to post. The same thing with Facebook. Do I, as a user, have a right, or any user, if I haven't paid for it in a contract, to have my content promoted actively in front of you, to make its way from me to you? In the old internet, there was no such thing. You would post an article on a blog, and the only way people would know it was there is if they actively visited your website. Like one of my favorites is Marginal Revolution by economist Tyler Cowen. You would have to go to Marginal Revolution to see what is the thing Tyler's writing about today. That is how the old internet worked. The social platforms have to do it differently. Or they don't have to, but if they don't do something, how are you going to decide what to watch when there's billions of options? And in that special sauce, that the rules of the ranking that gives rise to your particular feed is where all the action is. And it's not easy to think about this from a what is right and wrong perspective. I think we should all be celebrating the fact that we can express ourselves and acquire information and disseminate information like never before in human history. And I think this points to the closest I've got to an answer for how to confront the enemies of freedom of speech and expression in our society and the truly diabolical criminal forces using the power of the state to manipulate us and control what we do and do not see. We have at our disposal the ability, if we are active about it, to seek out multiple sources, more sources than ever before, and round out our understanding. It'll never be perfect, and it's exhausting, and it takes more time and effort, and it requires us to try to consciously check our impulses, two of which are, if it bleeds, it leads. So I want to see something salacious and provocative. That's what we all ultimately want. That's what high click-through rates are all about. So that's one thing we have to kind of be aware of in ourselves, is that we are going to be inclined to swipe through nonsense that ticks us off. Or makes us laugh. That's better than being ticked off, but let's be honest. A lot of times we're just getting ticked off. The other thing is we prefer to hear things that agree with us. When I put my interview with Bill de Blasio up, most of you didn't like it. Some of you unsubscribed. I know, my fans are going to tend to be people that see the world a lot like me. But it is hard for us if the only thing we are willing to listen to and entertain are the things that already sound correct. We do have to somehow practice being confronted with challenge. It's the only way that we can inch towards something that's kind of like truth, is by embracing different perspectives and trying to understand them. John Stuart Mill says, to paraphrase, the man that only understands his position doesn't even really understand that. And I believe that's fundamentally true. So in this era of crooks and cronies trying to lie to you, and politicians running for the highest office without sharing any details about their platform, and others blathering about nonsense all the time and putting forth half-truths and exaggerations, the only chance we have at inching towards the truth is challenging ourselves and challenging our kids. This is Dad Saves America, after all. So playing devil's advocate is a really, really good way to check yourself so we don't wreck the country. Before I bid you a farewell, I thought I'd read a couple quotes from our founding fathers about the centrality of freedom of speech and expression, because we cannot remind ourselves of this enough, especially in an age where other supposedly first world wealthy countries have completely abandoned this for the most trivial reasons imaginable. Benjamin Franklin. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And for that matter, won't have much of either in the long run. John Adams. Liberty must at all hazards be supported. We have a right to it, derived from our Maker. But if we are to have a free society, we must be willing to make sacrifices for it. I believe that is unquestionably true. And it is a small sacrifice to listen to dissent from time to time to keep yourself sane and on the right track. James Madison. The right of freely examining public characters and measures, and of free communication among the people thereon, is the only effectual guardian of every other right. That cannot be stressed enough. And you need to ask yourself real hard, what does it mean to not put forward a vision or a program for your candidacy? That is utterly unacceptable. It is an act of contempt for the American public. And finally, George Washington. If the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. These men understood what they were fighting for, what they were fighting and dying for, and what we as Americans must fight, and I hope not die, to protect. If the fight does come, though, I will say that Mark Zuckerberg does appear to have been readying himself for battle in the past couple of years. He's also been building bunkers in faraway lands, so I think he knows something we don't. But I can't not end without a little acknowledgement of how based Zuck has gotten recently. So I actually used to surf at the Jersey Shore, and I don't think I could have done that even when I was really good at it. So here's to you, Zuck. Let's do better this time around, shall we? Have a great weekend.